Welcome to the FinTech Times News and Views podcast. Established in 2016, the FinTech Times is a global multimedia news outlet centered around the world's first leading FinTech newspaper. We report on the latest and brightest ideas from the FinTech world. Follow the conversation using hashtag TFD News and Views and follow us at the FinTech Times. Hello, and welcome back to the FinTech Times News and Views podcast brought to you by Vanta. Vanta helps you save time, money, and build customer trust, all by centralizing program requirements and evidence collections for frameworks like Dora. If you want to manage risk and proof security, then head to vanta.com/fintechtimes to learn more. But anyway, guys, Happy New Year! It is 2025. We had a lovely little Christmas break, and now we're back talking about fintech. We've been back for a couple of days now, and it's just really weird to try and get back into the swing of things. I don't know if you guys feel the same, but obviously I'm here as ever with Tom and Francis. But how are you guys? How was your New Year? How was your Christmas? How are you feeling about 2025 and the start of what is to be, I guess, a very promising 12 months of all sorts of stuff?
Well, yeah, first of all, Happy New Year to you too, Polly. It's good to be back. As you said, we had a very nice break, and it's always good to just, turn off for a week or two. And we're just slowly, kicking off. I mean, it's been a bit of a slow start. Obviously, not too many announcements in the first couple of days of the year. But, that's always nice just to ease back into things. But we've still got some very good, interesting topics to talk about today. And like you said, yeah, it's an exciting time to be in fintech, and let's see what the next year holds.
Absolutely. And Francis, how about you? How was your Christmas, New Year's festive break?
First and foremost, before that, Happy New Year. Again, not sound like a broken record, but it's got to be said. Yeah, I had a very nice time. It was nice spending time with family, seeing friends, just getting a nice break, I suppose, and sort of being able to recharge, possibly, knock myself out by eating too much, but that's all normal. As Tom sort of said, yeah, it definitely feels like we're in the calm before the storm right now, because I don't think all the big players, or even the small players, to be honest, in the industry are quite back yet or ready to announce new things, because it's been extremely quiet in the last couple of days. But yeah, it's definitely going to pick up in the next couple of weeks. But no, it's good to be back, and looking forward to the conversation today.
Absolutely. And speaking of the conversation today, as you guys have said, obviously it's pretty quiet at the moment in the fintech world. Everyone kind of took the break off for Christmas and the holidays, so there hasn't been really a lot of news happening. So we thought it would be cool to sort of ease ourselves back into the podcast and back into news and views by looking at some predictions for 2025. So every year we do like a big sort of prediction series, speaking to fintech industry leaders, all from all different areas of fintech, asking them what do they think is going to be the next big thing for 2025. And so we have lots of those lovely predictions for you today, and we thought we'd chat through some of them, see what we think about them, see, I guess, if we think these predictions are going to happen, or maybe do we think there's going to be something else. Just a whole big sort of very popular, trendy look at the year ahead, which, everyone does right now, but why not? Let's get into it. So we've kind of picked a different topic each. So, I mean, Francis, what topic have you chosen?
So I've decided to look at mergers and acquisitions.
Fantastic. And Tom, what have you chosen?
I'm going to be looking into some industry experts' predictions surrounding personalization.
Amazing stuff. And then I'm going to be looking at crypto, DeFi, and blockchain. So, three very different, but then I think there's going to be kind of a lot of overlap in here a lot as we're talking about this. And because of that overlap, Tom, I think I'm going to let you go first, because I think when it comes to personalization, that is something that we're going to see pop up time and time again. So I'm gonna let you ease us in and kick us off.
Yeah, 100%. And it's one of the topics we got so many responses for. And as you said, that doesn't really come as much of a surprise, because obviously in 2024, we saw financial firms of all sizes, regardless of kind of what subtopic they operated in, they were trying to quickly implement the initiatives that, enhance how personalized their services are. And now many experts have shared their thoughts on, how they expect this kind of personalization trend to continue. And basically what I thought I'd do just to kick us off is by picking out a couple of the predictions from our experts to discuss. And the first of which comes from Campbell Shaw, who's the head of UK banking at the digital advertising company Cardlytics. And he basically says that data is going to continue to play a key role for banks, helping them to offer better offerings and promotions to build stronger bonds with customers and drive increased revenue. And Shaw basically also says that with the right data, banks can move away from this traditional one-size-fits-all approach. And essentially, he's saying that banks will fully embrace personalization, move into a more customer-centric method of building products. And instead of starting with the lending product, for example, and then establishing how customers will buy it, banks are instead going to, in the future, start viewing the customer as the starting point, building products around them and their life stages, leading to ultimately a much better customer experience. And I think this is a vision that I can totally see happening. I'm a bit skeptical as to whether we're going to see this exact vision happen, in the next 12 months. But I definitely think we're going to start getting close to this vision. And I think at the back end of last year, we already kind of started towards this trend. And another comment that also caught my attention was from the CEO and founder of Wave CX, which is a provider of personalized digital product engagement solutions for financial institutions. And he basically said that AI-powered engagement tools that combine intelligent search with contextual navigation, spanning both public and authenticated spaces, can transform how financial institutions serve their customers. And he's saying that in 2025, he hopes that financial services are going to start to lead the charge in humanizing digital experiences by putting simplicity and personalization at the forefront. And he said that fintechs have a huge role to play here by providing the tools and expertise to make these experiences possible. And I thought the reason, I picked personalization specifically is it's just such a huge thing that's, certainly from a consumer standpoint, they're going to see a huge amount of, whereas, they might not necessarily see other trends that go on that sort of happen in the background of sort of the banking industry. Personalization is something that directly impacts every single sort of user of banks, especially those that are engaging with their sort of digital banking apps. And I thought it was just a really interesting topic to start us off. And I guess I just want to see what your guys' take on this. I mean, I presume you expect the same, that personalization trends are going to continue to grow and we're going to see more and more personalization. But, have you got any specific thoughts on how that's going to take place in the next year?
I think for me, the one thing I will say is that I don't think personalization is a particularly new trend. I swear we had these conversations, at the end of 2023 going into 2024, and possibly even at the end of 2022 going into 2023. Like, I think we've kind of heard these ideas before of how, banks are finally gonna leverage data and they're finally gonna make the customer experience tailored and they're finally gonna move away from their one-size-fits-all approach, which I think is a buzzword, whatever you want to call it, that has just been constantly repeated over and over and over. So I think it's really interesting that we're still talking about it, because then it kind of goes to show that it's not happening. Like, it's not getting done. Like, I think it's being identified so many different times as a thing that needs to happen or should happen and, being predicted to happen in this case. And yet we never quite seem to get there. But then I wonder if maybe that's just the nature of kind of offering personalized services and tailored services, in that it isn't just sort of like a one and done kind of thing. Like, you have to constantly evolve and constantly keep going, because as sort of you evolve, your customer preferences evolve, and then the technology evolves, and you kind of just have to keep going and going. So there never really is a done phase, which I think is probably likely. So I think it's always really interesting when we kind of have these conversations about personalization and kind of offering personalized services. The one thing I also will say is, it'll be very interesting to see how AI comes up this year, because I think, obviously, as we all know, AI has been such a sort of trending buzzword topic over the last year or so, and but not just in sort of, within fintech and finance, because, AI has been in the fintech world for many, 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 many years, but it's also kind of become more conscious within just like the general consumer space. Like, just the normal people on the street know what AI is now, and they kind of understand how it works, and we're seeing use cases of AI crop up in a lot of different areas, especially with like ChatGPT and all sorts of things like that. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how AI is kind of utilized in fintech and finance this year, because I think, obviously, like, personalization and AI do go together hand in hand quite a lot of the time, like using AI to like help determine kind of what a person needs, etc. But I'm hoping that it's not going to go kind of too far in terms of sort of being like a trend, if that makes any sense at all. Like, I think a lot of there's a lot of things out there, not necessarily in the fintech world, but just like sort of generally, there's a lot of companies and a lot of like websites or services that are just really cramming AI in wherever they can, just to like say that they've got it. So they've got like an AI search tool, or they've got like an AI, what's it called, and they're really just like really jamming it in just so they can say they've got AI. And I think I'm wondering whether we're getting to the point of sort of a bit of not people are done with AI, but I think we're kind of getting to the point where maybe people aren't as enthused about AI as maybe they were a year ago, at least with the consumer basis. So if AI is going to be used within making fintech more personalized and making banks more personalized, which it absolutely should be because it's a very effective tool for that, I hope it is used in a way that actually makes sense and not just crammed in just to say that they've got a really fun, cool AI solution to like tick all the boxes and get people talking about it. You know what I mean? So that's sort of my thoughts about the whole thing.
Yeah, I think you make some really interesting points there, especially when you're talking about, first of all, the kind of, we've been talking about personalization and this trend of banks are finally going to be taking this on and really become personalized really quickly. And I think you make a really good point, actually, because that is the case. And I guess it just goes to show how slowly banks do implement these kind of ideas. And obviously we see a lot of new fintechs springing up that offer these, we've got this new personalized service, does X, Y, and Z. And yet for banks, it could be another 5 years before they're implementing the same kind of technology and releasing it to their customers. And I think that's just a case of just how slow moving it is. And again, another good point surrounding AI. And like you said, I am getting a bit sick personally of just seeing AI like, we've got AI this, AI that. It's like, okay, but is it actually going to do anything useful, or is it just something that you've crammed the word AI into? And half the time it isn't even AI at all. It's just like a slightly automated thing that they've got, that they're offering, that's like, it's AI driven. But I think certainly in terms of the background, I can see AI having an impact for the way banks operate, and certainly could speed up this process of bringing in these new technologies, because they can automate quite successfully these different processes. And it means that maybe this is the year that we're going to see personalization introduced. Although, as you said, I'm sure we probably said that last year and the year before, is this might be the year that really banks put their foot on the gas and start moving quickly. But Francis, what's your take on this? Do you agree, or have you got a slightly different take?
Slightly different take, start the year strong, devil's advocate and all that. But no, I wouldn't go so far as to say devil's advocate. But I definitely do think that I disagree slightly with the idea of that banks haven't introduced any personalization, because while we have been saying it for like the past 2-3 years, we need more personalization. I feel like banks have been introducing it, but like Polly sort of said, there isn't a part where or a stage where you can say, all right, we're done with personalization now. I think it's going to constantly be an evolving thing, because customers are never going to sort of be like, right, you've personalized it, I'm good. Their needs and desires and, what they want from their services are constantly going to be changing to fit their current demands. And I think because of that, personalization demands in turn are also going to have to be constantly changing. So while I think it's all well and good saying that, we legacy banks especially and traditional financial services haven't done anything, I think that's not entirely fair. I think they probably have done stuff. They probably could be doing a lot more, but I do think that the consumer demands have probably also changed over the past few years. One of the sort of, on the topic of AI and automation and how impactful that will be, one of the points in the article that stood out to me the most was from Sebastian Grobs from Ascender. And he's sort of talking about fostering emotional connections with customers. And so he's specifically looking at loyalty programs. But there's this idea that I think, this idea of fostering emotional connections, which just can't be achieved through AI and automation. And I feel like it's kind of like you both said, we're going to go away from a reliance on the technology almost and go back to ensuring there's a human touch. And there's this idea that as a consumer, you're going to be able to connect with the merchant selling to you and with the shop you're buying from. If they're saying, we've seen you like this, what about this? Or, we've seen that you bought X, here's a voucher for X next time you want to shop here, or something like that. I mean, it's very simple, but that is what personalization can be. And I think as loyalty programs and rewards continue to sort of tailor themselves to what consumers are already after, that's how they're going to get sort of recurring transactions and recurring purchases. And that's ultimately how an organization can firstly stay competitive, but also just survive and prosper as well. So I don't know, I feel like it's quite an interesting idea, this whole thing of personalization. But again, I just think it's constantly evolving, and therefore you can't really ever say, right, we've now implemented personalization, let's focus on the next thing. Because within a couple of weeks, I imagine, not even months, it's going to be expired and you're going to have to sort of relook at it again. So yeah, I think it's something that needs to be constantly monitored. But yeah, I think, to be honest, I really wouldn't be surprised if going into 2026, we say the same thing. Oh, we need more personalization. It's just because the demands would have changed over the years. Sorry.
Yeah, that's something I can see happening. Maybe we should make a note of it and set a little reminder that pops out at the end of the year and say, oh, we did predict that right at the start of the year. Maybe that's the real prediction, is that we're just going to be repeating ourselves every single year to the end of time. But with that, why don't we move on to your predictions, Polly? I know you've got some crypto-related predictions to talk about as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So mine were all around crypto, DeFi, and blockchain. Again, I think some very sort of big topics, and I think 2025 is going to bring some sort of huge shift. And I think one of the kind of ones I wanted to talk about was a quote from Kedan Stadelman, CTO and project lead of Komodo platform, talking about Bitcoin and how Bitcoin is going to have an increasing influence. And I think he's talking about obviously the US government and its role in the Bitcoin's future and how that could really alter the digital asset landscape. And he's predicting that Bitcoin will be recognized as a strategic reserve asset by the US government. And he said in 2025, the US government will begin purchasing Bitcoin as part of its strategic reserve under the new Trump administration. This will be a major recognition of Bitcoin as a hedge against inflation, geopolitical risk, and currency devaluation. Bitcoin's dominance in the crypto market will see a significant decline in 2025 as altcoins experience their largest rally ever, which is really interesting. With altcoins leading the charge. And I thought that was just a really interesting view at Bitcoin, because obviously I think with the Trump being elected as president and kind of all the comments around Bitcoin with that, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how cryptocurrency works in 2025 and kind of what differences that they're going to be in terms of, how its adoption grows, how things develop and how things move along, and is there going to be a boost, is there going to be a decline, are people bored of cryptocurrencies right now, or is this still sort of the latency area and people are really going to start booming into the cryptocurrency with Donald Trump with having an interest in Bitcoin? How is that going to help or hinder Bitcoin in general? So I think it's going to be like a really interesting year to see just kind of how it all works and how it all plays out, and it's genuinely going to be one of those kind of like watch and wait kind of years to see sort of what is going to happen, which I think is quite exciting for crypto. And another one I wanted to talk about was tokenization. Again, quite a trending topic. We've talked about tokenization a lot before, and that all kind of blockchain platforms and things like that. But Anish Jain, founder of WadsChain, a blockchain platform, anticipates that tokenization will reshape markets in 2025. He said that they're excited about the immense opportunity presented by the growing demand for tokenization across various sectors. We see business conditions turning favorably in 2025, especially through diversification within the tokenization landscape. By expanding offerings into products and services, we will touch other market segments effectively. And again, I just thought that was just a really interesting thing to see sort of tokenization being brought to the table and kind of how that's going to play out in terms of where we're going to go in 2025. So, I mean, what do you guys think on crypto and blockchain and DeFi and this all sorts of thing? I mean, Francis, you are our crypto guy, so I'll let you go first.
It's funny because I feel like of the three topics we've brought up, and probably of all the topics that we've sort of looked at in December and sort of reflecting on the year, I feel like this might be the hardest to predict and to actually sort of say this is what will happen. Because I think a few years ago, I don't think many people would have had confidence that Bitcoin was going to sort of recover after, I think it was 2021 when it hit $60,000. I think it was, or maybe 70. And I can't actually remember. That's pretty poor. But I think it was 70 actually. But regardless, when it hit that point and then it sort of started to go downhill after that, I think a lot of people thought, right, the hype is done, it's over, sort of goodbye crypto. And that obviously hasn't happened. And I think now is sort of, with sort of the Trump administration coming in and stuff, I think that is actually a really interesting point, because I just, you're right. I mean, who really knows how the US government, which is so impactful in the crypto market, or it can have a huge impact, I should say, on the crypto market. I just can't predict what will happen. I mean, if it's used as a reserve, I mean, it's so volatile that you never know what that could end up having, like a massively bad consequence. Although, on the other hand, it could have a massively good consequence. I don't know. I think it's just such a difficult thing to predict. I think the interesting thing, especially if the government does get involved in cryptocurrencies, is the knock-on effect we'll see on fraud levels in the space. Because I think as a result of crypto's adoption, we see a lot of smaller altcoins get developed that are just massive, like fraud schemes and scams that are just trying to get rich quick and rob people blind of their money. And I think it will just be interesting to see. Obviously, with the Trump administration, we're sort of probably going to see a sort of a turn away from regulation. But I think the crypto industry is something that still needs to have, especially with its high fraud levels, that needs to have a lot of regulation in order for it to really succeed, which I know is sort of a controversial point of view in the industry itself. But yeah, no, ultimately, I think it's a really, really difficult thing to call. And I think, yeah, it's like you said, it's definitely going to be a wait and see sector.
Yeah, 100%. I think you're absolutely right. It's just there's kind of no predicting it, and I think especially with the new US administration, as you said and I said, that I think is going to be the main thing here of how things are going to go, and yeah, it's going to be really interesting. And I really, like you say, I just can't decide how it's all going to play out. But I mean, Tom, what do you think on all of this?
I mean, definitely regarding the sort of crypto space, I think it's really interesting to see, especially how crypto investing is going to change. You know, if Donald Trump does decide to use Bitcoin as a strategic reserve asset, I think, you know, to begin with, that could have a huge sort of rallying effect for crypto, a lot more hype around Bitcoin and therefore other sort of alternative cryptocurrencies as well, which could, you know, bolster the price of them all, could have a really good impact on the whole crypto space. But then it's after that sort of hype has died down, where does it go? What happens? What kind of impact could it have? Could we see another huge crash? What impact that could have politically? It's such a volatile space. It's just impossible to predict. And if anyone can predict it, then they're going to be very, very rich. But another aspect of this that I think is important to talk about is the sort of use of tokenized real world assets. And I think they're going to continue to grow in popularity. I mean, this year already, you know, even though it hasn't been a particularly busy start to the year in terms of news stories, we've also had stories about, you know, the tokenization of gold and enabling people to invest in gold via Binance. I think this type of scenario is just going to grow and grow and grow, and people realize that, well, okay, while we've got this volatile crypto space that, you know, might invest a little bit in, they're going to think, well, the sort of tried and tested method of investing in the likes of gold is going to be, you know, a very attractive proposition for people. And especially when tokenization of real world assets enables this kind of investment to happen digitally via, you know, your favorite apps, your favorite investment apps, then, you know, I think that's going to be a trend that really does grow this year and is already starting to see a lot of growth even in the first few days of the year.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Lots of really good points there. And yeah, I think, you know, what we've kind of been saying just rings true. It's just going to be a really interesting year for us to sort of watch and see how it all plays out, which again always sounds like a bit of a cop-out thing to say, but I think in this case it's absolutely true. We just need to sort of see where the industry goes and see what happens, because I think you never quite know what's going to come next with things like this. But I mean, anyway, Francis, why don't we go to you to finish us off?
Yeah, absolutely. So sort of rounding out the trifecta of predictions and comments on them. I wanted to sort of discuss mergers and acquisitions because I feel like mergers and acquisitions are something that we've heard a lot about in the last few years. And I feel like this is something very similar to what you were saying earlier, Polly, which and well, Tom as well, you then added on it as well, is that I feel like this is something we hear every single year, that mergers and acquisitions are going to be really big this year, and that there's going to be a lot of investment in the space, and loads of like bigger companies are going to sort of look to partner and obtain these smaller ones. And I feel like that's something that we've heard before. So the question really is what makes 2025 different? And I think one of the comments from the article that stood out to me came from Marius Silverson, the CEO of eCapital. And in it, he sort of discusses that mergers and acquisitions are going to heat up again in this year, and that the main reason for this is that there can only really, oh well, this is me saying it now, not Marius, but there can only be so much of a decline. Sorry, I got there eventually. There can only be so much of a decline in the falling numbers of mergers and acquisitions, because as Sam Fuller from Houlihan Lokey notes, he says that there were 435 domestic and international mergers and acquisitions in Q4 of 2024, which was down from 479 from the year prior in the same time. So while it might look like that this is going to be an ongoing trend, that we sort of see this decline, I think what fintech is here to stay. That's indisputable. Like, we know that is going to happen. Like, it is not going anywhere. And because of that, the innovation that we continue to see from small firms is going to continue to stay. And that is making, and it kind of relates to the point earlier about personalization, is that we've seen personalization, but there's constantly new smaller fintechs that are bringing out newer things, or newer offerings, I should say, which are making the previous ones seem null and void. And I think it's a similar thing with just the fintech innovations in general that we're seeing from smaller startups that are looking to sort of upset the traditional space. And because of that, I feel like we can only see a limited, the decline in M&As is only sort of going to be to a point before it shoots up again, when it's a necessity, because organizations need to stay competitive, and the only way that they're going to do that is by having the latest innovations, which of course come from mergers and acquisitions. And I think a very key point is that as economic stability continues to rise, because obviously from COVID to now we've sort of seen a big dip, and now we're sort of going back to a more stable time, organizations are going to feel more confident in spending money and looking to broaden their offerings, I suppose, through mergers and acquisitions again. But no, I think it is, I'd like to say this isn't going to be something that we're going to be repeating again next year, in the sense that, we've heard this all before. It's sort of just more of the same. I'd like to say that at the end of this year, we can say there's been a rise in it, and it will continue to rise because the demand is going to be there for whatever the latest hype thing is. A few years ago, it was probably BNPL. Then we had AI. Who knows what it will be this year? But yeah, those are my thoughts. Tom, why don't we go to you first? What do you think?
I think it'll be really interesting to see whether, as we were talking about the sort of US election beforehand, I think it'll be really interesting to see whether the outcome of a lot of significant elections does have an impact on the likes of mergers and acquisitions. We've seen the conclusions of a lot of elections, like in the likes of the UK and the US, that could have a really, significant impact on mergers and acquisitions and deal making in not only these regions but beyond. And as you said, Sam Fuller had a comment, and something he expanded on was the fact that he believes that these kind of elections are going to result in an uptick in deal making, and this new sort of political clarity is going to restore investor confidence and have a huge impact. And I think I can believe that's the case. It's been definitely 2024 was a year of uncertainty of which way these elections are going to go. There's a lot of high interest rates. It was still a very difficult time economically, and we're starting to see in a lot of regions that slightly take a turn towards a more positive kind of numbers. And I think that's certainly going to be the type of thing that if that trend continues, then yeah, it's bound to have an impact on sort of increased investor confidence and more deals being done, and these types of deals taking place more frequently. and potentially larger deals taking place as well. So yeah, I think it is certainly very plausible and potentially even likely that these kind of deals are going to see an uptake. But like you said, it's something that people actually say almost every year is, oh, it's going to see an uptick this year. So are we all just kind of looking through rose-tinted glasses, or is this really the year that we're going to see a big uptake because of these factors? And I guess time will tell.
Yeah, and I think the point that you made there about the changes in governments and so on, and in turn the sort of regulations that go with that, and I think that's really what's going to sort of set the tone as well. I feel like if organizations are given more space to innovate because there's less regulation, I feel like we'll probably see sort of traditional firms want to snap them up before the regulations sort of come back in, potentially. And I think that might have like a really big impact on mergers and acquisitions, which might actually throw it in the complete other direction, and see them absolutely spike this year, and then in a few years' time we'll probably see them decrease again. But no, I think it's definitely a not to sound like a broken record, but a wait and see industry, or sector, I should say. Polly, what do you think?
I think the one thing that I want to add is kind of honing in on what you just said, Francis, about like kind of like innovation and kind of how fintechs want to be, everyone wants to be constantly innovating and they want to be constantly making the new thing. And I think one of the comments, which came from Alana Levine, Chief Revenue Officer at Fintel Connect, I think really interested me, because she said how 2024 basically saw that consumers don't want a dozen different apps for their finances. They want simplicity, and this sort of push for integrated services and having this kind of like all-in-one platform is what is going to drive more mergers and acquisitions. And I thought that was really interesting, and that kind of makes a lot of sense to me as to why we might see more mergers and acquisitions. This kind of, everyone wants to become the super app, everyone wants to have the all-in-one thing so that their consumers don't have to go elsewhere. They can go, they can stay in their own app, in their own financial service, to get all the things that they need. So I thought that was a really interesting point, and one that made a lot of sense to me, I think, as we're moving into 2025 and kind of how this year is going to go. And again, we're seeing, kind of like consumer preference and that idea of personalization coming in to influence mergers and acquisitions, and how people are thinking about fintech and how people are thinking about the services that they offer. And in a lot of the cases, the easiest way to offer more services is to do mergers and acquisitions. So yeah, it all kind of makes sense, and it's all kind of like one big circle, right, in terms of more partnerships, stronger partnerships, and understanding kind of what opportunities are out there to make a difference to consumers through M&A and technology, and combining things all together. So I think that was the thing that made a lot of sense to me, and that's, I think, we're going to see a lot more of as we move into this year and beyond. But anyway, that does bring us to the end of our discussion today. So thank you so much, guys, for talking with me. It feels like 2025 is going to be a good year. Let's all manifest that right now for, in all things, in fintech and just in general. Let's just go for a nice bit of a good year. So yeah, I mean, thank you so much, guys, for joining me once again. I can't wait to see how these predictions will play out. If you want to hear any more about anything we've talked about today in terms of these predictions or anything else from the fintech world, head on over to thefintechtimes.com to see plenty more news and insights over there. And yeah, welcome back to fintech. Let's hope 2025 is a good year. So thank you so much, guys, and I will catch you on the next one.
See you guys next week.
See you then.
Thanks for listening to the Fintech Times News and Views podcast. Don't miss next week's episode, and continue the conversation using #TFT News and Views, and follow us at the Fintech Times.